Good late afternoon. Thank you all for being here. What I will do is I will sum up for you what you have been doing all day long. Who of you considers him or herself as a system thinker? Okay, I thought so much that some of the speakers definitely are. And I think what you've been trained in today is system thinking. And I believe that it's one of the most urgent things that we bring that in society and into policymaking and into the ways businesses are run. Because then we will be able to see the connections, we will be able to find different solutions, and we will be able to see more connectivity and be able to find more structural change rather than blaming others for not behaving well. Structural change is what transformative change is about. And structural change is not only infrastructures. We're talking about the energy system you've had this year, we're talking about mobility, but it's also about institutional structures. And it's about the structures in our heads. And I've combined all of those three because they do go together when you apply a complex systems lens. And this is why I would like to cast on, as a first thing, the most general, maybe, definition of what is a complex system. It is an interconnected set of elements that is coherently organized in a way that achieves something. So something is interesting there and organized. And we've heard all of the morning that it's exactly the organizing patterns and the relationships that are very interesting if you want to start understanding what's going to be an outcome, a likely outcome of a system. Because systems are organized towards achieving something, they might also sometimes run into system traps. And that is when a structure becomes out of date or becomes too rigid. That's why the learning comes in. Observe where your system design is still fit for purpose or if it's losing that traction because maybe reality has changed. And this is where the system archetypes come in, and you can describe some of those system behaviors and structures to understand why doing more of the same, maybe a bit more efficiently, is mostly not the answer anymore when you're talking about transformational change. I will illustrate this in a moment. We've heard this morning from forests and how planting a lot of forests that grow wood quickly was an incentive at a time when we needed a lot of wood, and it was an incentive that made sense at the time. But what came out is a subsidy system that makes people that are investing in forests create things like that. And why it was rational for them at the time, now we understand that this is very vulnerable and not very resilient, neither to the beetles we have seen this morning, nor to fires, nor in possibilities to save water in the ground. So what we need to do in a frequent way is to observe if the systems that we've designed are still enabling for us, as the agents of change in society, to deliver on the goals that we have set ourselves. And that's the learning. And that is why overcoming system traps is within us. We're the ones that are creating human systems. We're the ones that can change them. And that starts with, because I don't want anybody to say, oh, the politicians are doing this, or the companies are doing that, or the consumers are doing that. I can't do anything. We can all do everything every single day, even at small steps, because we're all information providers that are talking about whether a particular system is still suitable or no. And this is why updating our mental infrastructures might be the one and only and biggest duty of us today, and then bringing that update into societies, regardless of where you're at. I will show you why that's crucial. Because it's built into the institutions with which we're living every single day. And I'll bring some examples in, because those are the institutions that will nudge you in a particular way, that will make you understand something and look and overlook something else. And this is why we had fantastic ideas this morning, and I collated a bit from the first few panels, on information breakdowns, where we don't really build the necessary information into the ways that we organize systems any longer to get to good outcomes. We heard one of the information breakdowns, very well illustrated by Alexa's performance and presentation this morning. However did we get to the idea that we're separate from nature? I mean, it's a story. But then we've organized different, very influential ways of organizing ourselves, like prices, the way we use money, to be blindfolded to that reality. That was in the presentation of Mr. Tallinger. The real value and the monetary value are not really aligned right now. So for him, as a monetary dude, as he said it, with a lot of money that wants to make more money, he can't even use it for real value creation any longer because it's not in the pricing systems. And that's what we should change. And wealth grows by amassing stuff. When you read the newspapers, it's exactly what we're after. We're going to lose out on wealth unless we all have ever bigger cars, ever bigger garages, ever bigger streets, ever bigger houses, ever bigger, and don't even know where they're supposed to be standing or sitting and how the space for that is going to be available. We heard that from Joseph Zettler, that maybe wealth is something that regenerates itself and continues to provide for us in a reliable way, rather than fixing lots of very valuable resources in something that stands around for 95% of the time, like most of our cars do today. And lastly, Markus Söder, I found him very interesting. Progress comes from business as usual. He kind of said, yeah, that's a myth we need to let go of. And then somehow, in the continuation of his conversation or talks that he shared with us, was quite a bit of interesting stuff to observe. Like, I can't ever eat meat or something like that. It's like, why is that not holding on to business as usual? And where is that fitting with what you've been saying? So it was interesting that the emergency alarm came on when he said these kinds of things of non-negotiable stuff. But let's start with, where can we go? Why can we all make a difference there? We can, and to counter the first one, grow the human potential. That's the one thing we're not investing in enough right now. We can end the accounting fiction, close that gap. And we can move from products to processes so that we don't need as much to still provide for everyone. And we can use the design potential that we all have in us to really create that future. And I'll run you through that, because I want all of you to go away with at least 3 things you're going to do differently tomorrow. We are necessarily having to change policies, but policy change is happening in a space of discourse and preparation in society. And this means we have to prepare the policy space for the policymakers to be able to come around with the new rules. Grow the human potential. I found it fantastic. I don't know, has someone looked at growth mindset and fixed mindset as concepts in how we approach the world and what we think we're capable of? I think right now it's a very interesting one to look at, because when you're in anxiety and you're worrying about something, you basically have 2 choices. One is shutting down and retreating to the things you know, and one is opening up and saying, it's not working anymore, I want to understand why. The second is the growth mindset. And it's interesting when you look at images for that, they're all kind of green and they're all kind of plant-oriented. So it's the growth in there. Whereas something that doesn't grow in means of developing is too rigid to live. We don't have to invent this all ourselves. It's an attitude that we can hold, but we can also say, wow, some people that are really smart, like UNESCO and OECD, that are actually influential on how we do education, they've come forward with really good roadmaps. We should just implement them. Like this Learning Compass 2030. It's very clear that we don't only need knowledge, because that's what AI can fit towards us quickly, but we need competencies. And in particular, competencies to unlearn the outdated information flows of the future and how to bring them in as stewards into the systems where they need to get. And this is why I think we all can become stewards of the new by developing a design mindset. It's something I really loved. I talked to Bruce Mao. He's a fantastic Canadian designer recently. And he's been doing massive change exhibitions where he was showing the systems that we're living in so that we can explore where we're nudged and how we're connected. And his one sentence that stuck with me is, once you start caring, you start designing. We have a lot of careless designs still floating around. And they're overseeing what's happening. But if you care, it means 3 things, like the dictionary says. A, yes, it has a bit of a feeling of a worry or anxiety. I care means I'm not indifferent. But that's a good thing, especially in crises. The next one is, if I go in the growth mindset, I will start to find solutions that provide a solution or that can cater to what a person or a situation needs. I don't retract, but I try to find solutions. And this means I'm going to look at what's actually at stake and what this situation or that person needs. So caring means looking carefully. And then you can come out and say, for example, what accounting are we using? Why is this not happening in a different way? And I think one of the most important things, this is from Sir Partha Dasgupta's report on the economics of biodiversity. And it was in some of the presentations we had today, nature can't claim political space for itself. It needs advocates, because it's silent, often invisible. You've had soil conversations today, but it's very mobile. so it doesn't necessarily fit within the boundaries of what we set around. So it needs agency, it needs us for speaking for it, to bring it into the ways that we're organizing things. And this is even if you're still waiting for accounting rules, but you can also start with reporting like the CSRD is telling us. You can do shadow accounting. You'd say, if I had a perfect business model, I would want to care for these things, and I would want this to have a value put on it. And then you completely change your perspective of what you can afford, what you cannot afford, what a cost and benefit calculation is. Expand it in horizon, and look a bit further in the future, very often creates a completely different picture as well. Climate economists will tell you that, biodiversity even more. Not doing anything right now is the most costly thing we can afford. We cannot really afford. It's going to be the damages that are outnumbering what we should invest today. And this is why I think the discussion right now is so interesting on the CSRD and the reporting standards, because a lot of it is like, oh, it's over-bureaucratic and it's really tedious and we have to put a lot of effort. Yes, I think there's amendment possibilities on the way it's done. But the question should be, how on earth have we run businesses before without looking at these things? Why have we declared them to be successful? Why wouldn't I want to know about these risks? Why aren't those new data points important for me? And then you can see a huge difference between the ones that get it, that are not talking about a mega trend that's kind of over, but they're understanding it's reality change that we're talking about. And they are the ones that are actually the future seers, because they don't give it to a separate department or some consultancies and say, create a report for me that's going to pass the supervision, but they're going to say, how can we change so that we can actually create business value differently in the future? And this is why I think it's very encouraging, IBM business value studies, to say, oh, wow, those are the ones that are future seers, and they are already creating better returns, attracting more talent, and are more innovative in many places. Because you actually start looking into the future and what's going to be valuable then, instead of looking at what you're doing with KPIs from the past. And this is not only on the business side, on our personal side, but also, obviously, for the national level. And Joseph Stiglitz, he's forgotten about biodiversity, but it was 2019. So maybe he would add it right now. But I thought it was putting it exactly in the same spin. The world is facing 3 existential crises: the climate crisis, an inequality crisis, the crisis in democracy, and yet the accepted ways information flows by which we measure economic performance give absolutely no hint that we might be facing a problem. That's a bit problematic. And this is why a lot of countries have started, and I think OECD had the Better Life Index, and we get much more creative about saying what are the actual assets that are being built in a society, what are the infrastructures that we are going to have in the future if we take on some debt or get private-public partnerships to work. This is from Australia, measuring what matters. Wherever you go, get out of the accounting fiction and test whether the numbers that are being applied are holding what you would like to see. And one important aspect, and I think it's so important because it's overlooked quite a lot of time, it's not only about climate change, biodiversity, but it's about how we run things. It's a circularity or regenerative ways of doing things. And that means that you have to collaborate more and better. We have a weird discourse about progress and consumer rights and lesser price is always better or convenient. And then the single thing is convenient, and lots of single things create massive drawdowns and drawbacks that I don't think any one of us individually would want. But the sum, the tyranny of small steps, is that unless we think about systems in a different way that make it easy. This is convenient when you have multi-use systems that are making it very easy for you as a consumer to run through society. Take something, give it away at some other place again. So the whole recycling, the whole mobility, the whole providing of a lot of the services in everyday life can be organized in a way that it's not costing the earth, but are very convenient to use. Yes, we need to build stuff differently, and that's the last point I have. Use all the design potentials that you have wherever you are. City builders, you have the possibility to not have big fights over the square meters, but to say, how are we going to recreate a future living space, actually, where humans like to be? Where you're having energy, where you're having cooling, where you're having water storage, where you're having short distances in one place. And that makes it much more attractive to be thinking about that future. I'm really talking to a lot of people right now that have a lot of money. And I think they have to understand that capital, especially financial capital, is also a verb. It's not very good to just hoard it somewhere in asset inflation developments. And this is McKinsey Global, actually, that comes out with this and say, are we really using financial capital and the way we account for wealth in a productive way? Shouldn't the money, like people like Mr. Tallinger are using, go through something in the real life and help it like an energy stream to build the kind of things like the new cities? But for that, they need new criteria on return on investment, and they need new ideas about patient capital and how long they might go through it, so that money can become a service of the real economy again, rather than being an extraction tool for the ones that possess land, possess real estate, possess the things that others are dependent on, and thus drive up prices because they want to have a return. That's the social crisis we're in. That's not a very good use of a lot of financial wealth that's available. And this is why my two last points are that political leaders cannot make a lot of choices unless they're supported by other very influential forces. And in studies, we talk about high SES people. That's the one that have high socioeconomic status. And that means you have three more roles next to a citizen or a consumer. Those two are more influential as well when you have a lot of money, but also you have as an investor the steering possibilities. You have as a decision maker, that's this slide, the possibilities, and as a role model. Because your voice is looked at. So what you're presenting on the outside is going to inform a lot of other people and inspire them, or say, what is a legitimate answer today? And so if you have both, when you're a corporate leader, understand that what you're saying right now will have a huge influence on how policy making can happen, how much populist sources and forces can actually make policy making completely impossible. But what we need is long, loud legal signals, because only then transformative change can happen. So do look at what you're doing beyond your own business case. What's your role in society? Because, and this is why I'm so happy that you're here, President von der Leyen, I really think we need all the support from every one of us to maintain that Green Deal and develop it further. Maybe we drop the term green because it's made so many people think it's one party that represents it, or it's only the tree huggers that are behind it. But what it is the wealth model of the European continent. And it is a whole of institution approach. It's the smartest thing I've ever seen, and I've been doing this for 25 years, where finally you look through all the different programs and all different ministries, in this case, director generals, and see how they align in their steering impact in society so that every other thing kind of enforces each other instead of going in perverse incentives against each other. And it needs support, and it needs endurance. Because there's one thing that's always connected with transformative change, and that's the delta of doom. It means that in the short term, things will be more tedious. You need more energy, you need more money, you need more structural change, which is just not as convenient, not as easygoing as the rest. But it means that you're ending up in a system that works in the future. And this is where I found yesterday, we had a presentation at the Pulse Network from the Futures Today Institute that's talked to a lot of CEOs in Germany and then come forward with modeling and said there's two scenarios. A is you keep with the business as usual idea. That's the big path forward for now. And it's going to crumble down. And the other one is go through the tedious first bit, and then you can build a new solution that can work in the 21st century. So the big message for everyone that says, I don't really want to do this right now, we can't really afford this right now, it's like, okay, transformation is going to come anyway. You can have it by disaster, or you can help design it. And if anybody needs help on doing those arguments, putting them out there, we've created a little bit of that. This is a debate compass every 2 weeks. We're bringing in best science to help you debunk what is being pushed out in that increasingly uninformed public debate, so that you can become a change person, you can become an information flow source, and you can engage with each other, but also in the claiming of the future that you want to go to. Thank you very, very much.